Everybody doing okay? All right. I got a lot of information, so we're gonna have to get into it. We've had some rough things go on this week. We've had some folks who've lost some loved ones, and obviously, you know, our hearts are going out to the people who are recovering from Vegas. Just that terrible tragedy. It's just kind of mind-numbing, to be honest. I really don't know how to process that sometimes, and so we're actually, you know, we had planned this before that event. But today we're actually going to be talking about this series. It's complicated, and the topic today is really going to be about pain when we go through painful situations. And so it's not the lightest material you're going to hear in church. So please bear with me. I know there's a lot of just things we kind of got to walk through, and so let's go ahead and begin today by opening up in prayer, and then we'll get going. Dear Jesus, I thank you for every single person that's here. Lord, I thank you for the faces you brought back. I thank you for the new faces that we've encountered. And Jesus, I'm asking that you touch their hearts today. Lord, I don't know everything that's going on. I don't know their hurts and their pains, but you do. And so, God, I'm asking that you begin to do a work in their heart. Lord, I can't do it. No message or sermon can do it. No amount of worship music can do it. Only you know how to touch our hearts. And so, Lord, I'm asking that today. In Jesus' name, amen. The verse that we've been kind of looking at during this series is written in 1 Corinthians, and it says, now, speaking in the present tense, we see in a mirror that's dimly, but then one day we're going to see things face to face. Now I only know in part, but then I'm going to know fully. And that's really where we're at with life. We are in a season where things get a little foggy at times. I've had those moments. I am currently just kind of coming out of one, actually. The last 2-3 months, I've had a lot of fog in my life. I've had a lot of, man, how do I work through this? And, not so much about the church, but just some personal things that I've just been really struggling with and trying to get a grasp on. And oftentimes I feel like I'm this guy. I know what I believe up here, but then when I go and apply it in my life, some things just kind of throw me for a curve. Anyone else ever been there where you're a little confused about where am I supposed to be headed? Where am I supposed to be going? And I think there's 3 main reasons why life gets complicated. We've been talking about that. Realities I've created. Those are things I've just, made some mistakes. Realities created for me. And then finally, spiritual realities that are beyond me. I can't see them. We're going to talk about the spiritual realities beyond me and you next week, but today we're going to talk about the realities created for me. And all 3 of these realities kind of really, we're all going to encounter them. Realities created for me are things outside my control. I couldn't stop it. It wasn't about being more disciplined. It wasn't about being more efficient with my life. It just kind of came in. And last week we talked about stress, something that I think we all battle at times. And today I want to kind of touch base with this idea of pain. I just went through a very painful experience, actually, this last week. Friday, I had a 10.5-hour car ride with my family from up north down here. I'm telling you, we could break Al-Qaeda in 2 hours if we stuffed them in my van with my kids and had us go on a long car ride. So I know I want to just kind of give you a caveat. I am not an expert on pain. To be honest, I've had God has been incredibly gracious. We have gone through death. We have gone through some trauma. But when you hear about what some people are going through as a result of their faith, I've never tasted anything like that. I've had the privilege of growing up in this country where we really respect that. But there are folks who even if you've not suffered for your faith or gone through extreme hostile treatment because of what you believe, everybody has encountered pain. Everybody's going to encounter pain. I've heard a pastor say it like this: you're either coming out of a trial, or going into a trial. And there's this little waiting period in between there, but at the end of the day, there's going to be some pain that comes our way. And I kind of want to just talk about that a little bit. There was a guy back in the day, he wrote something about pain. I thought it was pretty good. He said, we can ignore pleasure, but pain insists upon being attended to. And God whispers to us in our pleasures and speaks to us in our conscience, but God shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. How many remember 9/11, the Sunday after 9/11? 9/11 happened on a Tuesday. The Sunday after 9/11 what had happened to all the churches? They were filled, right? Because all of a sudden we woke up and went, oh my goodness, I've never experienced anything like this. And we came face to face with terrible tragedy, and it stirred something inside of us. And all our politicians were on the front steps of the Capitol singing, God bless America. I mean, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative. And we were like, oh my word, the country's coming together. And it lasted about a week, okay? And then everyone went back to infighting. And it's the same thing that happens with like this week with Vegas. People are gonna argue, and they're going to say things like, if you're on the liberal side of it, you're going to say, listen, a little bit more gun control wouldn't hurt. If you're on the conservative side, you say, we know better than that, because gun control can't stop what? Evil. It can't stop what's in your heart. And in fact, it's really complicated because you take away all the guns. Societies have done that in the past, and that's how you got Nazi Germany, and that's how you got the Soviet Union. Those countries, you weren't even allowed to own that. So if you strip that, what's troubling our country is something deeper than just that. There's something underneath that we're not quite getting to, but we're just trying our best to work around it and figure out what in the world is going on. And I think it's really kind of It's just sobering. I mean, it just takes your breath away. I was watching some of the video and footage of what happened in Vegas, and I couldn't get my head around it. I mean, here's a guy just doing something that, I think it's purely satanic. I think it's totally from the pit of hell. I think it's meant to just bring in so much discouragement and trauma to people, and to lose their heart, to lose this connectedness that we all have. And I just think there's darkness there that we don't really know about that's really pushing into these mass shootings and everything that's going on. But it's going to lead to pain. Those people's lives are never going to be the same, ever. And your life, if it's gone through pain, has never been the same. Whether it's a divorce, whether it's a child that's not in step with you, whatever it might be, when you go through those things, the trauma and the pain is deep. Now, you're not bleeding out. No one's shooting at you like we saw this week, but boy, something's going on in your heart. Something's happening deep inside. And I think there's two kinds of pain. The first one is dull yet constant. It's not like this terrifying, terrible pain that happened right now in your life, but it's dull, but it never goes away. I want to give you a personal example, and I want to be careful when I'm talking about this, but my son Jackson, I've shared with you, has autism. And there are days, I don't know how to put this, there are days where it's just hard. I mean, it's just hard. It's hard to deal with the pressure of life as it is. But then you throw a child in there who has some of these struggles, and man, it can feel overwhelming. And I'll be honest, there's been moments in my life where I've just been kind of like, I resent the fact that my son struggles with that. I'll be perfectly honest. I resent that. I've resented that. I've also seen, though, that God has used something like that to so shape my life and so grow me up and mature me and figure out what selflessness is and what love that's unconditional is. I mean, it seems like, we're going to talk about this later on, but all the valuable lessons of life did not happen to me on sunny days. The lessons of life that have really paid off have been through pain. And there's just no other way to say it. It's painful experiences that can shape us. So some of the people in this church have gone through tremendous pain. They've gone through, actually the second kind is sharp and sudden. And folks in our church have gone through, this is like an unexpected death, sudden job loss. I mean, it just came out of left field. You got served papers. Your spouse wants a divorce. Your spouse has been cheating on you. I mean, it's just your worst nightmare happening all at once. Some folks in this church, they've gone through Vietnam War. They're veterans. They still struggle with both of these. They have the stress of that sharp and sudden memory of their best friends dying in battle. And they remember seeing their buddies and then not seeing their buddies anymore. And that moment has so shaken them, but here's how they live with it. Most of the time, it goes underneath and it becomes a dull but constant pain. And so many of Vietnam veterans, if it's in the morning time, there's rules on waking up dad if he's a former Vietnam vet. You don't go in and just wake him up. Like jump on the bed and wake. Those kids know better sometimes. They know, hey, because they'll come out of that sleep ready to fight. Because that's how they lived on battle. It has shaped their life, and the people around them are affected by it. You know, I'm going to go back to this. Some of the symptoms are exhaustion, confusion, sadness, anxiety, agitation, numbness, disassociation, confusion. Some of you are like, that sounds like Monday to me, you know? I mean, that's kind of like a regular day. But those are the things. I think these are the two kinds, and they're both different, and they both require different approaches. You know, not every day you're going to lose something of tremendous value. It's not always going to be a sharp pain. Some of us, we're just living with this dull one. That's just really, it's always there, though. And I want to talk about some of these personal pains we're probably going to all go through in life. Number one is the pain of rejection. There's going to be moments in your life and in your relationships, particularly with marriage, where that person may have said to you, I don't want you anymore. This isn't something I want to do anymore. And they walk out. That pain of rejection is real. I think the most common reaction to this pain is hurt. You just felt like your heart got stepped on. And I think one of our core needs is to belong. You know, one of the things that God has wired us with, and this is kind of funny stuff for guys to talk about. We don't go here very much. But at the end of the day, you see it when men are in battle together. There is a brotherhood there. There is a fierce, I will die for you. I will lay down my life for you. This brotherhood that's present. What is that? That comes from the need to belong. They see these folks as family. And in the same way, we all have this need to belong to something. And it is hard to be rejected by folks, especially folks that we love. And I want to ask a little bit, why are we hurt when we go through rejection? I think one of the biggest reasons is that we've been displaced. You and I are being displaced when we face rejection. And displacement is the opposite of finding your place, right? Citizenship means basically a community. That's really what it means. When you're a citizen of America, the proper definition of it is that you're part of the community of America. And many times when you go through things like in a church, some of you have been displaced. When you go through marriage, you've been displaced. When you're at work, you've been displaced. And you're not able to find that place anymore that you belong. And I'm telling you, it can be painful. I've been in an environment where all of a sudden I thought for sure I fit, and I found out, wow, I'm really not compatible here anymore. And that leads to that hurt. Like, man, what is going on? I've just become out of that group. Why? Because now I'm off by myself. I'm doing my own thing. And that's why people are always looking for something to belong to. We have events going on around here all the time. I mean, amazing events that you can get involved in. Not the church, but like just in general, the public. You know, hobbies you can become a part of, things you can want to be a part of, things you can want to do. There's like Star Wars clubs, and these guys get dressed up as Star Wars figures, and I'm not knocking it if any of you love Star Wars, but they show up at the theater at midnight, right? And they're not going to see the movie like you and me. They're going with a bunch of their friends dressed up as, you know, Jabba the Hutt and a stormtrooper. You know, they have this whole thing. Why? Because they want to belong to something. And when you and I get displaced, that whole group of people is not in our life anymore. And that's very painful. This is one of the main reasons we're going to be doing small groups. We call them city groups. Because Sunday morning, if this is the extent of you and I connecting or us connecting with each other, it's not going to work. Because I got to have someone in my life to break it down for me and go, Jack, I think you're off a little bit here, or maybe I can pray for you about this, or tell me what's going on in your life. Jesus did this all the time. Always tried to make people feel like they were a part of it. Like there wasn't someone on the out. The only person I don't want to fit in this church is someone who thinks they got it all together. That's the only person that I'm like, this might not be the best place for you. Because we're gonna keep it as an environment where you come in with your stuff, I'm coming in with my stuff, and we're gonna bring it to Jesus together. Say, God, show me how to do this. Show me how to live the way you want me to live. The second pain is betrayal. This one can hurt, and I think the most common reaction to this is building up walls. You know, when you talk to people, when you're starting, you feel led to start a church. You know, you start to make relationships, but very quickly, just by asking some questions, you can find out if people have dealt with this specific pain. And I think the walls is really a great indicator. People will bring up these walls. I have a neighbor who is just a phenomenal guy. I just have a heart for him. I love the guy. He hasn't been in church in a long time, and he has an autistic son. And he told me a story one day about his experience at church, because we were sitting there talking, and he said, "Listen, I know we're friends and everything, but I just want you to know I'm never going to be a part of your church." And I was like, "Okay." And he goes, "I'm never going to be a member of a church anymore. I'm never doing that again." And then he tells me the story about what happened to his son. When his son was 14 and struggling with autism as well, he went and sat down with the youth group. And when the son sat down with the youth group, the whole rest of the youth group got up, walked away, and just didn't want to be by him. He was a nuisance to him. He was a pest. And that he understood, because it's teenage kids. Teenage kids can be, not the kindest at times. But he went to the leadership and he said, "Hey, listen, I just want to make you aware, this is how some of the kids are reacting to my son, and I'm just a little concerned that, maybe you want someone to talk to him and say, hey, listen, we need to approach this a little bit differently." And the leadership just kind of, blew it off, and it went away. And as a result, then he proceeds to tell me, "I'm never gonna be a part of a church again." What's he telling me that day? I got walls, man, and I built those walls to do what? To protect me, because I've exposed myself before, and people absolutely, discouraged me. They absolutely ruined my hopes of things working out. And so now I'm working with someone. I have a relationship with someone who has 20 years of that experience where they're just struggling and trying to find a way to get okay and trying to be whole. So those are things you're going to find. I think why are you hurt? I think it's because you've been trespassed. And I want to use this word specifically because this is actually what Jesus prayed in the early translations of the Bible. When he was teaching his disciples how to pray, he says in the old way of saying it, "Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us." You know what a trespass is? It's just going a little bit beyond what the boundary is. It's not going and destroying those folks. It's really just going beyond what you're allowed to do, what you should be doing. And I think everybody lacks sensitivity to this. And so when people build walls, why? Because they've been trespassed against. There's things that people have gone too far. They've hurt other people. And then finally, I think there's the pain of loss. And this is something that it can be very difficult to deal with. I think the most common reaction to this is anger. When something happens, and when I lost my child, when I lost Jackson at SeaWorld, some of you may not know that story, but I spent about 45 minutes looking for my son, and I could not find him anywhere. And I went and talked with the local security force there. And let me tell you, the local security force was not giving me any kind of comfort. It was kind of a, well, he'll turn up, that kind of thing. And I'm sitting there like just kind of getting fumed because this guy's about to taste the wrath of not only me. I was really trying to hold him off against my wife, right? Like Mama Bear was coming out. Where's my son? She's ready to claw the guy's eyes out because he's just kind of like, I don't know, it'll be fine. I'm looking at him like, are you hearing me, man? I wanted to hurt the guy because he's not being sensitive to what's going on. And I think when you have that loss happen, man, you're going to get angry. And I think we think that if we go to church and we believe in Jesus, we're never going to encounter those feelings. That is not true. The Bible actually talks about it. It says, listen, in your anger, do not sin. So what he's saying there is, listen, you're going to have anger. You're going to have moments where you're just frustrated and upset, but don't let it go too far. Don't let it control you. It says, do not let the sun go down while you are still angry. It means don't let it linger indefinitely. What happens if you let the anger just go down inside and just stay there for a long, long time? Man, you end up bitter. You end up broken. You're depressed. You're discouraged. Another translation says it like this, and don't sin by letting anger control you. Rather, don't let the sun go down while you are still angry. And I think we're hurt because we've been robbed. Loss gives you this feeling of being robbed. I really believe that. that's what we're struggling with when we experience the pain of loss. Like something was here and now it's been stolen from me. Mark Cook, he plays bass guitar usually. He's not here today, but he and his wife Trina, they're very special friends to us. We've gotten to know them a little bit, but Trina has told me a story of kind of what her life has been going like the last couple years. They moved back to Columbia in 2015, and her godmother died in November. Trina had a twin sister, and she was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer in January. And then finally in June 28th, her niece, her twin sister's daughter, was driving up from Alabama to see her and got in a terrible car wreck and died. And then just about 54 days later, her twin sister finally passed from the cancer. So those things piled upon pile upon pile, all that death, man, it makes you feel what? It makes you feel like you've been robbed. The Bible talks about this connection. And it actually says, listen, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. But Jesus said, I've come that they may have life and have it to the full. The enemy that we have doesn't want a piece of your life. He wants to devour it. What we see in Vegas, that's why I think it's satanic. That's why I think it's darkness that's working inside of people's lives, because that is his motive. He gets pleasure by distorting the image of mankind that God created. A few years ago, my sister Nicole had a child. Well, our family went through some death and some loss as well. And my sister-in-law, Angie, had a baby that was, kind of dead at birth. She died at birth. And about 13 weeks later, Nicole, my sister, was living in Georgia at the time. She just got done working out. She'd had her son, Luke, and Luke is the same age as Jackson. So Luke would be about 9 right now. And she laid Luke down and went to go take a shower. She came back. Luke's face was blue. The body was completely limp and lifeless. And Luke had died while she was in the shower of SIDS. And I remember being in Michigan at the time, and I remember my mom calling me and saying, hey, Luke's gone. Luke's dead. And I was just totally, what do you mean? How did that happen? I mean, it was such I had just held him a couple weeks prior. I was one of the last ones to see him alive. And I mean, he had this beautiful black hair, these big blue eyes, just a gorgeous little baby. And I couldn't believe it. And I'll tell you, the most painful thing that I saw was when we pulled up in Georgia, and I came up to Nicole, and Nicole was sitting on the steps. I'll never forget it. Nicole was sitting on the steps, and she was still nursing Luke at the time. And she said, my arms are literally aching because I can't hold him anymore. His body's in a morgue, and I'm conditioned to be holding this child, feeding him. My body is saying it's time to feed my child, and she can't do it. And let me tell you, it is not a quick recovery when you go through things like that, because you have just been robbed. You know, that's what God says about death. It is the ultimate enemy. Death is what we're all trying to outrun because it's so painful. That loss, that sense of loss goes so deep, and you're so hurt because you have been robbed. Let me tell you, when you've gone through that, that is not the hand of God in your life. That is the hand of our enemy, the devil. He wants to see that become an event that totally shatters our lives. And it took a long time. That road to recovery is still ongoing because it's so painful. But I want to talk about the fact that these are the pains, and then also the dangers of us having unresolved pain. I think one of the reasons is one of the dangers is people learn to live around it, but are never healed from it. I mean, how many people do you know that have this? And you wonder, man, why are they so moody? Why are they so angry? Why do they lash out all the time? And you sit down, you hear their story, and you're like, you know what? I'd probably lash out too. If I was treated like that, if I was hurt like that, I'd be tempted to do to other people and to never let what was done to me happen again. And that makes you angry. It makes you upset. And so you just learn to live around it. How many times have we heard this, that someone's dad was an alcoholic. He came home and beat the child. And then what happens to that child? That child continues, when he grows up into a full adult, that child continues that pattern, and on and on and on it goes. Why? Because they were never healed from the original pain that they encountered. The second danger, I think, is it forever disrupts their life with God. You just lose the warmth. You kind of coil up. And it's very natural for this to happen. This is totally normal for you when you go through some loss, when you go through these different pains, for you to feel a little bit of apprehension when it comes to God. But I want to show you this. I think God uses pain to do some amazing things. Number one, it helps develop personal empathy and compassion. How many of you heard this phrase? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Empathy is the ability to genuinely relate to other people. And how do we develop that empathy? By going through stuff ourselves. If you've gone through something, you're going to have compassion for people that go through the same thing. You know what the opposite of this is? It's a mental illness known as narcissism. You have no ability to relate to anybody because you are the center of the universe. And you're able to just kind of, the reality that comes into your life, you don't live in it. And so those folks we avoid, right? The folks that have that kind of narcissistic bent, man, I stay away from those folks because I can't relate. There's no ability to connect there. But someone who's gone through, like we've connected with people down here with kids who have special needs or autism, like that. Why? Why is it so easy? Oh, because I've walked a mile in those shoes too. Why is it so easy to connect with other people when I've encountered premature death? Because I've tasted that, and it's terrible. And this is how we develop that ability. And Jesus did the same thing. It says in the Bible, he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. Jesus had empathy for you and me and our struggles. When you and I make mistakes, he doesn't look at us and go, man, I'm going to have to thump him for that one. He's looking at our life saying, I can take care of that because my wounds have covered that pain. The second way God uses pain is to fulfill a deeper purpose. We've been hearing a lot over the last 5 years about this group called ISIS, this terrorist group in the Middle East. And that's what gets all the press, and rightly so. There's horrific things that they do. But did you know that right now, the Muslim population is coming to faith in Jesus Christ in numbers we have never seen in all of human history, ever. They have basically been an impenetrable people group that Christianity has not been able to pierce. In 1,400 years of its existence, we've not been able to win genuine converts. In fact, there was a book done on it, and there's about, a dozen movements. They call them movement, 1,000 people or more coming to faith and getting baptized. And from the original start of Islam all the way until about 2000, there were about a dozen of those movements. The problem with those movements is that they were done for tax purposes, like people got saved and believed in Jesus and then got baptized so they could get tax relief or different things like that, so it's all skewed. And from 2000, the beginning of the terrorist attacks here in America, to now, there's been hundreds of these movements. They are coming to faith in Jesus. And you know what they all say? I don't know who this is. I mean, you would not believe the amount of people that all say the same thing that are coming to faith because they don't have Bibles. So how are they coming to faith? They're all seeing this man in white. They'll have a dream, they'll have a vision, they'll have some kind of, at night someone will be speaking to them in their dreams, and they will go to a missionary and they'll go, who is this man in white? I don't know who this man is. I don't read about him in the Quran. I don't know who he is. I have no recollection of it. Who is this guy? Because every time he talks to me, I feel peace. And he tells me everything's going to be okay. Now, these folks have been displaced, and ISIS is just jackhammering them. And so they're moving. They're nomadic now. They're not in their daily routine, so it's disrupting their life. And they're hearing and seeing in their minds for the first time this figure in white, and they come to these missionaries. And so the missionaries say, listen, you can't tell a Muslim that they're wrong. They have to come to that conclusion. I'm like, that sounds like a lot of folks I live with, I think we're hanging out with the same people. And so what they'll do is they'll give them one of the Gospels, and it's the part where Jesus gets turned to white. It's called the Transfiguration. And they say, well, read this and see if this is similar. And they will read this passage, and they will go, that's the man that I've been seeing in my vision. That's the man I've been seeing in my dream. And so would God allow ISIS to rise up and get strong so that this group that we could never, ever before in human history win to Jesus finally find Jesus? I think he would. And so we need to be careful as believers that we don't freak and flip out and panic when bad things come in, because God is doing something deeper than all that pain. Can I get an amen for that? That is so encouraging to me. I don't know why that just blesses my heart, but to see these folks coming to Jesus and them saying, I see this man in white who gives me peace when he speaks to me, I want him in my life. And God is moving in that people group like never before. Paul had this happen in his life to fulfill a deeper purpose. He says, listen, I've got this struggle in my life. He called it a handicap. Basically, we used to call it a thorn in the side. Like, you can operate, but this thing's always needling you. And he said, I prayed to God 3 times about this thing. Like, God, if you got rid of this thing, I could serve you so much better. How many ever prayed like that? Like, God, you just fix my marriage, I'll be great, If you just fix this, I'll be wonderful. If you just give me a new boss and fire the old one, I'll be great, And God talked to him, and he said 3 different times, I said, will you take this away, please take this away. But then something happens in Paul. This is so cool. Paul says, I was given the gift of a handicap to keep me in constant touch with my limitations. At first, man, I did not think of this as a gift, and I begged God, remove it. But he said, my favor is enough. It's all you need, because my strength, penned some of the most incredible words, my strength comes into its own in your weakness. Let me tell you, the other side of having Jackson and struggling with autism is that I have found a strength inside me that is not my own. And I know it. It is the strength of Jesus. Because there's days where I just want to kick a puppy. I want to just hurt something. And those are the moments that I can turn to God, and I find his strength is perfect. That's how they used to say it. It's perfect in weakness. And we think strength comes by having an impenetrable life. That's not how God says it. No, my strength is perfected in your weakness. And so sometimes he'll allow us to go through pain to fulfill a deeper purpose. Very profound things. How God uses pain to write a personal story that helps others. Listen, you might be going through something that's really difficult, and it isn't even really about you. You haven't done anything wrong. God isn't angry at you. He isn't upset. But there's someone in your life, you may not even know it yet, who needs to hear this story that you're about to go through. And that's why God's allowing it to take place. Someone needs to get out of trouble, and God has chosen you to lead them out. There's a story in the Bible that talks exactly about this, writing a personal story that helps others. And this figure is in the Old Testament. His name was Joseph. And some of you may not know the story of Joseph. Joseph is loved by his daddy. He is favored by his daddy. And he has some brothers who are not so thrilled and happy about it. And basically, they make his life a living hell. And he starts having these dreams and visions. And in his dreams and visions, he's like the grand poobah, and everybody else is bowing down to him. And he tells his brothers this. And his brothers were like, well, that sounds wonderful, Joseph. Not exactly. They threw him in a pit, sold him away to slavery in Egypt, and told his dad that he'd died, been eaten by a bunch of wild animals. And here's Joseph, the favored one, all of a sudden, no higher than a slave. And God puts him in prison after prison, and failure and betrayal after betrayal, until one day everything changes and the purpose that God had all opens up, and he becomes the number 2 man in charge in Egypt, just under Pharaoh. And Joseph had this encounter with his brothers years later after they'd betrayed him and hurt him. And when his father had finally died, they all came to him and were worried that he was going to do what? He was going to do like you and I would do. Let's payback time, right? That's what we'd be thinking. And Joseph here's what they have to say, and they're like, listen, please, don't take advantage, don't hurt us after Dad dies. And Joseph starts to just be grieved. He's just so brokenhearted. Because he says, basically saying, do you not understand? Don't you get it? What God has been doing this whole time? He says, listen, I'm not gonna downplay the wrong you did. I'm just gonna tell you there was a purpose to it. And look, this is what he says. You intended to harm me, talking to his brothers. But God intended it all for what? Say that. Good. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many. And sometimes you're going through the pain you're going through because there's other people that God wants to reach, but he has to develop that story in you. He has to take you to that spot where you're able to help them, but you're also humble enough to lead them well. Because there's some people, they don't go through the process that Joseph did, and they get that position of leadership, they get that position of authority, and what do to the people beneath them? They take advantage of them. They don't treat them well. They're not gentle with them. And God develops humility before he elevates us. And so be encouraged. There might be some pain in your life that you can't see the fruit and purpose of until maybe a year, 5 years, 10 years from now, but God has a plan. Finally, to reveal love for God we didn't know we had. I think God uses this pain all the time to reveal the fact that I really do love God more than I thought. Sometimes we can't realize our love for God unless it's what? Tested. Yeah. You can't know it until there's some things that come in your life and actually test it. Peter talked about it. He said, listen, these trials, he's talking to this group of believers that are getting persecuted. He said, these trials will show you that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold. So when your faith remains strong through many trials, it will bring you much praise and glory and honor. Man, that's beautiful. So listen, this is going to show you that you do really love me. Because I'll be honest, there's some days where I'm like, man, do I love God as much as I thought I did? Do I want to follow him the way and then I'll go through a season of trial and I'll realize, wow, he really is my rock. He really is my anchor. He really is the one I'm holding on to. The one thing for today is sometimes the greatest indicator of our love for God is really releasing something of great value to him. Warwick's going to come on up. I wanted us to just kind of think around this idea of releasing something of great value, because basically, if you've gone through pain, it hurt. And I don't know your stories, every one of yours. I just know that if you're like me, you got one. And there's some pain, there's some difficulty in your life. And I want to kind of walk you through some ways that I've tried to learn how to release these pains in my heart to God, whether it was the pain of loss and losing someone, betrayal, rejection, all those kinds of things. There's just a few things that I think will help. First of all, I think if we will let God audit your heart. What does that audit mean? It means you're letting the truth come up to the surface. Some of us, we want to deny that we're struggling with some of that hurt, some of that pain. But if we'll let God just kind of take a deeper look at our heart, everything will start to kind of come up. I served at a church that kind of went through this process in a financial way. My boss started serving there, and his daddy was the pastor. And he found, after his dad had a heart attack, he started looking at the bills of the church, and he started realizing, man, there's something going on here. We're borrowing money to pay the interest of other loans. And he knew, because he's kind of a numbers guy, he knew that wasn't right. So he went down to the IRS and actually said, listen, I don't know how bad it is, but I think we're in trouble. And they had agents come out, and this is back in the 80s, before we had all the tech stuff we have now. They broke open these laptops, started doing all the numbers, and all these numbers guys came in. And they finally did the whole audit, and they realized the church was $5.6 million in debt. And it was incredibly painful. But without that audit, without that, hey, we got to change, and here's why, because we don't have, so they had to file for bankruptcy. I mean, the whole bit, and it took them 25 years to slug it out and get free of that bondage. That auditing part is very difficult, but if you and I allow God to do that, He'll bring things to the surface. And that's the first step. The reason why it's important is because we can't grasp what hurts us sometimes. But if God will bring it up to the surface, then we can understand, oh, this is what I'm struggling with. And sometimes it's not things you even thought it was. Sometimes it's things that kind of caught you by surprise. And then finally, ask God to heal it. Ask God to touch that part of your life that's been pain. I don't know if it's a broken relationship. I don't know if it's a thing at work, if it's a loss that you've had, a person that's betrayed you, whatever it might be. God is the only one that can touch you and heal you. And no sermon can do it, and not enough worship songs can do it. Jesus was meant to be your healer and mine. And he knows how to do that. I want to ask you to bow your heads, close your eyes, please. I want to just pray a prayer to help us with that. If that's something that you're carrying around, I want to ask you today, could you release it? Would you be open to letting that back, letting that go, and giving it back to God? And letting God audit my heart, letting him reveal it so I can understand it, and then finally asking God to heal it. Maybe you tried your hardest to do it yourself, and it's just ended up in frustration. But today, you're going to do something different. You're going to release that back to God. So I'm going to pray right now. Lord Jesus, I ask that you would please touch every person in this room that has encountered pain, that has struggled with some of these things. I'm asking that you give them the freedom to see life anew again. Lord, the hurts and the pains that they've gone through, I'm asking, God, that you'd reveal it to them and that they would bring it to you and release it. That you would do a mighty work. And I ask that you'd move in their hearts. And Lord, that they would not try harder or do a better job or be more disciplined, but Lord, that they would just be honest with you and let you do a work that only you could take credit for. And Lord, I'm not asking for you to help them to just put a Band-Aid on it. I'm asking for complete healing. Jesus, would you move in their lives? In your name, amen.